The ballroom pulsed with laughter and music, the kind of polished celebration that only weddings seem to summon. Crystal chandeliers scattered warm light across white linen tables. The band in the corner glided from a jazz number into a classic pop tune, and couples filled the dance floor like they'd been waiting their whole lives for this exact song. Glasses clinked, sequins shimmered, and love seemed to have occupied every seat in the room. Except one. Alina Whitmore sat near the edge of the action, her wheelchair tucked just behind an arch of cascading flowers. It was the kind of spot that said reserved without anyone having to say it. Her champagne sat untouched on the table, bubbles rising and popping like impatient sighs. The dress she wore, silk navy, perfectly tailored, hugged her figure with practiced elegance. But inside she felt hollow, like she was nothing more than an ornament at someone else's fairy tale. She had been to enough events to know how this worked. People would glance at her, smile too wide, then quickly look away. The wheelchair always made them nervous, even here, even among people who once called themselves friends. Tonight was supposed to be about her college roommate's big day, a woman who had once sworn they'd be inseparable. Now that friend swirled across the dance floor in her husband's arms, radiant, her joy so blinding it made Alina ache. Alina tilted her head, adjusted her lipstick with a napkin. Perfect, composed, unreachable. The kind of woman executives respected, the kind of woman investors trusted. But deep down, she knew the truth. She felt like a ghost at her own life. Then came the voice. "Will you be my date?" At first, she thought she'd imagined it, but when she looked up, she found him standing there. A man in his 30s, brown-eyed, his gray button-down shirt rolled at the sleeves, jeans faded at the knees. Not a tailored suit, not a Rolex. Just a man who looked like he'd worked with his hands that day and decided not to apologize for it. His expression wasn't pity, it wasn't discomfort. It was steady, calm, almost warm, like sunlight breaking through leaves. "I don't dance," she said quickly, her words clipped, rehearsed. "I'm paralyzed." Usually that stopped people. Usually it made them backpedal with awkward apologies, followed by the retreating smile of someone who didn't know what to do next. But this man only shrugged. "I didn't say you had to stand." His smile was soft, not forced. "Just be my date." The words startled her more than she wanted to admit. He didn't flinch, didn't rush to fill the silence. He just stayed there, like her answer wouldn't scare him off. And then she saw her, a little girl, no more than 3, clutching a cookie in one hand and a stuffed bunny in the other. She wore a lavender dress with tiny ribbons tied into her curls, her eyes wide and curious. She wasn't looking at the dance floor. She wasn't looking at the cookie. She was looking straight at Alina, like she was the most fascinating person in the room. Alina's throat tightened. Kids had a way of doing that, of seeing past the polished armor adults wore. "I'm Luna," the girl said suddenly, stepping closer and tugging gently at Alina's hand. "You can dance with me instead." Alina blinked. "Sweetheart, I—" But Luna had already laced their fingers together and lifted their arms like a ballerina in training. With a bright giggle, she twirled beneath the arch of flowers, still holding on to Alina's hand. "See?" Luna declared proudly. "Now it's your turn." Alina froze. The music faded into the background. The chatter of the crowd dimmed. For a moment, it felt like the entire room had gone still. The man crouched a little, his voice low, patient. "It's okay," he said. "She doesn't ask questions. She just believes." Before she realized it, he'd stepped forward and placed one hand gently on the back of her chair. With the lightest touch, he gave it a small spin, slow and easy, like a waltz in place. The motion was simple, effortless, and yet it felt monumental. Something in Alina cracked. A laugh escaped her, surprised and unguarded, so soft it startled her. Luna clapped like she'd just seen fireworks. "I knew you could do it," the little girl cheered. Alina's hand trembled as she looked down at their fingers still entwined, then back up at the man crouching beside her. He wasn't crowding her. He wasn't trying to fix her. He was just there, present. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes before she could stop them. I don't usually—" Her voice trailed off, tight in her throat. "You don't have to explain," he said quietly. "I figured you looked like someone who needed a dance, or at least someone who didn't care how things are usually done." Her chest tightened. The world she had built for herself, the boardrooms, the titles, the silent penthouse apartment, felt so far away from this moment. And yet, with him crouched beside her in worn sneakers and with Luna grinning like the sun itself, this moment felt more real than anything she'd touched in years. No one's asked me to dance since the accident, she admitted finally, her voice so soft she almost didn't hear herself. Not once. His eyes didn't waver. Then maybe it's time someone did. She wanted to resist, to retreat back behind her armor of steel and glass. But she couldn't. Not when Luna leaned her head against her arm like they'd been friends forever. Not when this man looked at her without pity, without hesitation, just belief. For the first time in a long time, Alina didn't feel like a symbol. She didn't feel like a shadow. She felt seen. The night pressed on, the music carrying them forward. But Alina hardly noticed. Something had shifted. Not in a grand cinematic sweep, but in the quietest, simplest of ways. Because sometimes the smallest hand can lead the heaviest heart back into the light. And for Alina Whitmore, everything began to change with one question. The morning after the wedding felt strangely quiet. Alina woke in her high-rise apartment to the sound of distant traffic, the faint hum of the city she'd chosen for its anonymity. The skyline outside her floor-to-ceiling windows shimmered under the morning sun, but the light only highlighted how stark and silent her place really was. Her dress from last night still hung over the back of a chair. She wheeled past it on the way to the kitchen, her hand brushing over the fabric. For a fleeting second, she could almost hear the echo of a child's laugh, see the little lavender dress twirling in front of her, feel the weightless turn of her chair under the steady guidance of a stranger's hand. Kevin. She tried to shake the thought, tried to bury it beneath coffee and the day's headlines. That was just one night, she told herself. Just a dance, nothing more. But even as she pressed the brew button, her phone buzzed. Hi, Alina. This is Kevin from the wedding last night. Luna made a drawing of you, and she's been asking when she'll see you again. Could I send it to you? Maybe buy you a coffee sometime, if that's not too forward. Alina stared at the screen, her heart tightening in a way she didn't expect. She should have deleted it, should have left it unanswered, like she did with most things that threatened to inch past her walls. But her thumb hovered, her breath caught. Her apartment suddenly felt too big, too cold. Before she realized it, she had typed back, Hi, Kevin. I'd love to see Luna's drawing. And coffee sounds nice. When the reply whooshed off, her pulse kicked. She hadn't planned to open that door. And yet, just like last night, there was something about him, about both of them, that made her believe she wasn't invisible anymore. Moments later, her phone lit up again, this time with a photo. 3 stick figures, scribbled in bright marker colors. One had messy brown hair and square glasses. Kevin, unmistakably. The second wore a puffy lavender dress and held a bunny, Luna in all her glory. And the third sat in a bright purple wheelchair, with long yellow hair and a sparkly dress. Miss Alina. Beneath the picture, scrawled in uneven handwriting, Luna had written, Us. Alina's throat burned. It wasn't polished, it wasn't perfect. But it was the first thing in 2 years that made her smile without forcing it. She pinned the drawing on her fridge before she could talk herself out of it. Later that week, she met them at a little cafe tucked between a laundromat and a hardware store. Not the kind of place she was used to, no marble countertops, no overpriced lattes with leaf art, but the kind of place that smelled of cinnamon and fresh bread. Kevin was already there, Luna perched in a booster seat with crayons scattered across the table. He looked up when she wheeled in, his expression soft but steady. No pity, just the same grounded warmth she remembered. Alina, he said simply, like her name belonged in his mouth. Kevin, she replied, her voice more even than she felt. Luna waved enthusiastically. Hi, Miss Alina. I saved you a muffin. Alina couldn't help but laugh. That's very thoughtful, thank you. She rolled up to the table, adjusting slightly as Kevin helped move a chair aside. His movements weren't rehearsed, but they weren't awkward either. It was the small details, how he held space for her without making it a spectacle, that chipped at her armor. They ordered coffee and pastries, the easy kind of food that invited conversation. At first, it was Luna who filled the air, telling elaborate stories about her stuffed animals, about how her bunny had flown to the moon and back. Kevin let her ramble, his eyes fond but amused, occasionally prompting her with a question. Alina found herself listening, smiling at the pure imagination spilling from the child. And when Luna proudly announced, Miss Alina can be the queen in my story, her chest tightened again, that same unexpected ache of being chosen. Kevin leaned back slightly, studying her with quiet curiosity. "She doesn't usually warm up this fast," he said. "Guess you've made an impression." Alina raised a brow. "On her, maybe." "On both of us," he replied, his tone steady. She looked away, flustered by the sincerity in his voice. She wasn't used to it. In her world, words were weapons, measured, calculated, sharpened. But here, over chipped mugs and sticky napkins, they felt honest. As they walked out later, well, he walked, she rolled. Alina hesitated at the corner. "This isn't usually what I do," she admitted, her hands tightening on the wheels. "Meeting like this. Letting people in." Kevin nodded, his gaze steady. "I figured, but maybe that's the point. Sometimes the best things start when you don't follow the usual script." Before she could respond, Luna slipped her small hand into Alina's, her eyes shining. "Can we see you again?" The question landed heavier than it should have. Alina's instinct was to retreat, to put up her walls again, but she looked down at Luna's hopeful face, then back at Kevin's patient, unassuming presence. And for the first time in years, she didn't want to run. "Yes," she heard herself say, "I'd like that." Days turned into a rhythm, a text here, a call there. Small moments, building something fragile but real. One afternoon, Kevin invited her to see one of his projects. She hesitated. Her calendar was full of board meetings and investor calls, but curiosity won. When she arrived, she didn't know what to expect. What she found stopped her cold. A playground, but not the kind she grew up with. This one had wide ramps instead of narrow ladders, swings with supportive backs, textured walls for sensory play, bright colors, inclusive by design, not as an afterthought. Children ran and laughed, some in wheelchairs, some with braces, some with none of those things at all. And for once, no one looked out of place. Alina swallowed hard. "You built this?" Kevin shrugged, almost sheepish. "Took 2 years to get approval. They said it wasn't cost efficient. I built it anyway." Her hands tightened on her chair's armrests. She'd sat through countless boardroom debates where cost efficient was the excuse to deny humanity. And here he was, a man with faded jeans and a stubborn streak, quietly reshaping the world in ways that mattered. "You built more than a playground," she said softly. "You built belonging." Kevin met her gaze, and for a moment, the air between them thickened with unspoken truth. He crouched beside her again, not because she needed help, but because he seemed to know she hated being looked down on. "Belonging is the one thing money can't buy," he said. "But sometimes it only takes a choice." Alina's throat tightened. She couldn't remember the last time someone's words had disarmed her so completely. That night, back in her apartment, she stared at Luna's drawing on the fridge. The purple wheelchair, the smiling sun, the three of them, side by side. And for the first time in a long time, she let herself imagine what it might mean to be part of an us. The city was restless that afternoon, the kind of late summer day when the sun clung stubbornly to the sky and the sidewalks pulsed with the movement of strangers. Alina had just left a meeting downtown, her mind still fogged by the endless arguments of a board more concerned with quarterly profits than people. She needed air, needed movement, even if her movement came on wheels. Her chair hummed over the uneven pavement, the rhythm familiar by now. She tried to focus on the rhythm of her breath, the beat of the crosswalk signal flashing its bright white figure. She started forward, wheels bumping against the curb cut. Halfway across, the light blinked yellow. Cars began to edge forward impatiently, engines rumbling like restless animals. And then everything stopped. Her right front caster caught on a slab of raised concrete. She tried to push forward, nothing. She reversed, nothing. The wheel jammed tight, the chair shuddering as traffic surged. A horn blared. Another followed. Her hands slipped against the rims, panic rushing in sharp, suffocating waves. She froze. "Don't move!" The voice cut through the noise, strong, urgent. She turned her head and saw him. Kevin, sprinting across the crosswalk like he'd done it 1,000 times, one arm lifted toward an oncoming car, the other reaching for her chair. Within seconds, his hands were firm on the handles. "I've got you," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. He tilted the chair back slightly, freed the caster with practiced ease, and pushed them both onto the sidewalk just as the light turned green and traffic surged behind them. The horns faded into the distance. Alina sat there, chest heaving, her pulse still rattling in her ears. Kevin crouched slightly, his hands still on the back of the chair, as if letting go too soon might undo the rescue. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. She shook her head, her voice low. No, just surprised. His smile softened. That makes two of us. Didn't think I'd run into you here, literally. Something broke inside her then, something between fear and relief. She let out a breath that trembled on the way out, half a laugh, half a sob. Kevin straightened, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, I was on my way to grab dinner with Luna. There's this little Thai place a couple blocks over. Come with us. She'd be over the moon. Elena hesitated. Her instinct was to retreat, to rebuild the walls panic had shaken loose. But Luna's drawing was still taped to her fridge, and the memory of her hand in that child's, spinning beneath the wedding lights, felt closer than the fear still clinging to her chest. Sure, she said finally. Why not? The restaurant was small, cozy, painted in warm oranges and golds. A bell chimed as they entered, and the scent of ginger and basil wrapped around her like a comforting blanket. Luna was already at the table, crayons scattered across another paper placemat. When she saw Elena, her face lit up like fireworks. Miss Elena, you came! Her enthusiasm was disarming. Elena smiled despite herself. I did. I heard the food here is amazing. It is, Luna assured her, very seriously, before launching into a story about spring rolls. Kevin slid into the seat beside his daughter, glancing at Elena across the table. His smile was faint, but it lingered, like he was grateful she hadn't said no. They ordered noodles, curry, spring rolls. The food came quickly, steaming, fragrant. Elena found herself listening more than speaking, surprised at how safe silence felt with them. Kevin talked easily, but never to impress. He told her about his job, designing inclusive playgrounds, making sure kids with disabilities could play alongside their peers. It started when Luna was born, he explained. I kept looking at the world through her eyes. She needed softness, so I tried to build some. Elena looked at Luna, who was drawing on her placemat, tongue stuck out in concentration. You built more than softness, she said quietly. She's wonderful. Kevin's expression softened, but there was something wistful in it too. Her mom left when Luna was 1, said she wasn't cut out for it. I think she expected me to give up, trade the struggle for convenience. Elena studied him carefully. And you didn't? He shook his head. No, I just figured Luna deserved someone who stayed. He said it simply, without bitterness, but the words lodged in Elena's chest. She had spent years equating love with leaving, friends who faded, colleagues who avoided, a fiancé who never made it past the crash. Her voice was quiet when she replied. I used to think people leaving meant I wasn't enough. Kevin didn't interrupt, didn't rush to fill the silence. He just listened. Her eyes stung, but she kept going. Turns out, maybe they just weren't built to stay. Their eyes met across the table. For once, she didn't feel like she had to prove herself. Didn't feel like she had to defend the weight she carried. Her hands trembled in her lap. She blinked quickly, hoping it would stop the tears, but one slipped free anyway. Kevin didn't panic, didn't reach for tissues. He simply stretched his hand across the table, rested it gently over hers, and said nothing. And that was everything. When they left the restaurant, the sky was streaked with pink and orange, the kind of twilight that made the city feel softer, almost forgiving. Luna skipped ahead, clutching her bunny. Kevin walked beside Elena, his steps slow, matching her pace without making it obvious. At the corner, he paused. I don't want to push, he said quietly, but if you'd like, Luna and I spend Saturdays at the park. You could join us. No expectations, just company. The words were simple, but they cracked open something she hadn't realized was still locked. For so long, she had lived in a world of expectations, corporate numbers, flawless appearances, silent strength. Here was someone offering her the opposite, a space where she didn't have to perform. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I think I'd like that. That night back in her apartment, Elena wheeled into the kitchen and found herself staring at the drawing on her fridge again. The purple wheelchair, the smiling sun, the three of them, side by side. Her reflection in the window looked foreign, softer, less guarded. For the first time since the accident, she didn't just see what she'd lost. She saw a possibility. The Saturday morning air carried the smell of cut grass and sunscreen. Parents set up lawn chairs, kids clutched juice boxes, and the hum of conversation floated above the playground. But this wasn't the kind of playground Elena remembered from her childhood. The uneven monkey bars, the sharp-edged slides, the places where she'd once scraped her knees and laughed it off. This place was different, thoughtful, inviting. As soon as Kevin wheeled her through the wide entrance, she saw it. Ramps, not steps. swings with back supports instead of just dangling chains, a merry-go-round level with the ground so no one had to climb, panels with bright textures, mirrors, shapes, and musical chimes that invited curious hands. In every corner, children were laughing. Some ran, some rolled, some used walkers. None of them looked out of place. Alina stopped, her hands tightening on her rims. "You built this?" Kevin shoved his hands in his pockets, a little sheepish. "Yeah. Took 2 years to get the city council to sign off. They said it wasn't cost efficient. I told them they were measuring the wrong kind of cost." Her throat tightened. "And they let you?" "They fought me every step," he admitted. "But I built it anyway." He wasn't bragging. He said it the way he might say he fixed a leaky faucet or planted a tree. Matter of fact, unapologetic. Alina's gaze swept over the playground again, her chest heavy. How many nights had she sat in sterile boardrooms, listening to executives slice up humanity with the cold knife of profit margins? And here was Kevin, with his faded jeans and stubborn streak, quietly reshaping the world with wood, bolts, and vision. "You didn't just build a playground," she whispered. "You built belonging." He looked at her then, really looked, and for a moment, neither of them moved. The sounds of children blurred into background music. His eyes softened, and the corner of his mouth lifted in something that wasn't quite a smile, but it carried the weight of agreement. "Belonging's the one thing money can't buy," he said, "but sometimes it only takes a choice." Alina turned away quickly because the intensity of his words scared her more than she wanted to admit. She wasn't used to people who spoke from the heart. She was used to armor, to strategy, to rehearsed charm. Kevin's simplicity left her defenseless. They found a bench under a white oak tree. Kevin sat, elbows on his knees, watching Luna climb the sensory wall with determination. Alina wheeled close, but her gaze wasn't on Luna. It was on the parallel bars that stretched across a corner of the park. Her chest tightened. Kevin noticed. "You've done therapy before?" She hesitated. "For a while after the accident. Twice a week for 6 months. But progress was slow. Too slow. The doctors told me not to expect much." He didn't rush to fill the silence. She hated that about him, how his silence made her want to keep talking. "My fiancé left," she admitted softly. "Friends stopped coming. Every time I showed up at therapy, it felt like I was the only one who believed I could change. And eventually, even I stopped." Her voice cracked, but she pushed through it. "It got easier not to hope." Kevin crouched down beside her chair, his hand resting lightly on the armrest. Not to hold, not to push, just to be level with her. "What if we made it simple?" he asked. "No pressure, no milestones, just 2 steps a day with someone who won't let go." Her laugh was bitter, trembling. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," he admitted, "but neither is surviving. And you've already proven you can do that." She stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or cry, and when he held out his hand, palm open, her heart hammered against her ribs. "You trust me?" he asked. It felt like the kind of question that carried more weight than it should. But slowly, almost against her will, she nodded. They rolled to the parallel bars. Kevin locked her chair, then gently helped her shift her hands onto the rails. His arm circled her back, steady but not suffocating. "All right," he said softly. "1 foot forward, that's all." Her muscles tensed. Her breath came shallow, sharp. For a long moment, nothing happened. The rails were cold under her fingers, the ground stretching before her like an impossible cliff. Then she heard it. "Go, Miss Alina." Luna, clapping from the end of the bars, her bunny tucked under one arm. Her grin was so wide it looked like sunlight. Alina exhaled. Slowly, painfully, she shifted her right foot forward. Her body wobbled. Kevin's grip tightened. "1," he murmured. Her left foot followed, trembling but steady. 2. Her knees threatened to buckle, but she held on. Her chest heaved, her arms burned, but she was upright. 2 steps. Just 2. "That's enough," Kevin said gently. He eased her back into the chair, his movements careful, reverent. Alina's breath came in gasps. She buried her face in her hands, hot tears spilling through her fingers. Not from shame, not from pain. From shock, from triumph. "I didn't think I could," she whispered. "I forgot what it felt like. To believe in myself." Kevin crouched again, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. His voice was quiet, unwavering. "You didn't forget. You just needed someone to remind you." She leaned forward, her forehead resting against his shoulder, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. No applause, no cameras. Just the steady rhythm of her breath, his presence, and Luna's delighted cheers echoing across the park. "Daddy, look!" Luna's voice rang out from the monkey bars. "I can do it by myself." Alina lifted her head, tears still wet on her cheeks. She looked at Kevin, her voice breaking into a soft laugh. "So can I." That night, when she wheeled into her apartment, everything felt different. The white walls didn't ache as much. The silence wasn't as heavy. On her fridge, Luna's drawing waited. 3 smiling figures under a grinning sun. She stared at the stick figure in the purple wheelchair. For the first time, she didn't see limitation. She saw possibility. And for the first time in 2 years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over. The next morning, Alina almost convinced herself not to go. Her body ached in places she hadn't felt in years. Muscles that had been silent since the accident now buzzing, sore, alive. The logical part of her brain whispered that yesterday was enough, that she didn't need to prove anything more. But then she remembered Luna's voice. "Go, Miss Alina," and Kevin's steady tone. "Just 2 steps a day." So she went. When she wheeled into the park, Luna spotted her first. The little girl shot across the grass, Bunny bouncing in her arms, curls flying. "You came back!" she squealed, throwing her arms around Alina's waist as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Alina laughed, the sound still new and surprising. "Of course I did. I couldn't miss my favorite coach." Luna grinned so wide her cheeks nearly swallowed her eyes. "Daddy, she's here!" Kevin emerged from near the swings, a ball cap shading his eyes. He jogged over, his smile easy, genuine. "Morning," he said. "I was starting to think you'd cancel." "I almost did," Alina admitted, rolling forward. "But then I remembered how bossy your daughter is." Luna puffed out her chest proudly. "I'm the coach!" Kevin chuckled. "She takes the job seriously." He glanced at Alina, his expression softening. "I'm glad you came." The words landed heavier than she expected. She nodded, trying to swallow the lump in her throat. They started slowly, just like before. Kevin guided her to the parallel bars, his movements careful but unhesitant. His presence was a strange mix of grounding and freeing. He never pushed too hard, but he never let her quit too soon. "One step at a time," he reminded her. Her breath came shallow at first, her arms trembling as she shifted her weight. One step, then another. Her knees shook, threatening to give, but Kevin's hand was steady at her back. Luna clapped from the sidelines, shouting numbers like a cheerleader counting touchdowns. 1, 2, 3! By the 4th step, Alina's body quivered with effort. Sweat dampened her hairline, her heart racing like she'd run a marathon. She collapsed back into her chair, gasping. "That's it," Kevin said gently. "That's progress." Her head dropped into her hands. "It doesn't feel like progress. It feels like failure." "Failure?" Kevin crouched, leveling his eyes with hers. "Alina, you just walked farther than you have in 2 years. That's not failure. That's defiance." Her throat tightened. His words weren't poetic. They were stronger than that, unpolished, unflinching, true. They came back the next day, and the day after that. Each time, Luna's cheers grew louder. Each time, Kevin's hand stayed steady. And each time, Alina fought against the voice inside her that said this was pointless, that she'd only end up broken again. By the 5th day, Kevin decided to change it up. "Let's see how long you can stand," he suggested, wheeling her to the bars. "Not walking, just breathing." She swallowed hard, fear prickling her skin. "What if I can't?" "Then you can't," he said simply, "and we try again tomorrow." "But what if you can?" The challenge burned hotter than the fear. She gripped the bars, her arms trembling as she pulled herself upright. Kevin's arm circled her back, firm, steady. "Okay," he whispered, "just breathe." Her legs quivered almost instantly, but she focused on the rhythm of his voice, the faint breeze brushing her hair, the sound of children laughing in the distance. 5 seconds, 8, 10. Her knees screamed, her arms ached, but she held. 12, Kevin counted softly. 13, 14. At 15 seconds, her strength faltered. Her body gave way, but Kevin caught her before she fell, easing her gently back into the chair. The tears came fast, uninvited. She buried her face in her hands, shaking. "I can't do this," she choked. "I thought I could, but I can't." Kevin knelt again, his hands resting lightly on her arms. His voice was quiet but unyielding. "Alina, listen to me. You just did. 15 seconds on your feet. 2 years ago, they told you it was impossible. Today, you proved them wrong. Her shoulders trembled. She lifted her face, cheeks wet, eyes raw. I forgot what it felt like to believe in myself. He brushed a strand of damp hair from her cheek. You didn't forget. You just stopped hearing your own voice. His gaze locked on hers, steady, unwavering. I'll remind you every single day if I have to. Something inside her broke then. Not in the way that left scars, but in the way that made room for light. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his shoulder, sobbing softly. For the first time, she wasn't crying out of grief, or anger, or loneliness. She was crying because hope hurt, and because hope healed. Kevin didn't move, didn't speak. He just held her, the steady anchor she hadn't realized she'd been searching for. Above them, Luna's voice rang out from the monkey bars. Daddy, look! I can do it by myself! Alina pulled back, wiping her eyes quickly, her laugh breaking through the tears. She's braver than both of us. Kevin smiled. She gets it from you. The words hit her like a stone thrown into still water, rippling outward. For so long, she had thought of herself as broken, lesser, forgotten. But here was a man who saw bravery in her, who saw strength where she only saw scars. And for the first time, she didn't argue. That evening, Alina sat at her kitchen table, Luna's drawing still taped to the fridge in front of her. The purple wheelchair, the smiling sun, the three stick figures side by side. She traced the outline with her finger, her chest full and aching. For 2 years, her life had been defined by survival, by enduring. But now there was something else. Possibility. She glanced at her phone, at Kevin's last text. See you tomorrow? Her lips curved into a smile she couldn't stop. She typed back, yes, because for the first time in years, she wanted a tomorrow. The invitation sat on Alina's desk for nearly a week before she finally admitted she wanted to go. It was the annual Vital Core Charity Gala, one of those glittering, over-the-top events that gathered politicians, celebrities, and investors in the same chandeliered room. 2 years ago, she'd been the one everyone waited for at the top of the staircase, flawless and commanding. Now she hesitated even to RSVP, but something inside her whispered that she couldn't keep living in the shadows. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't want to go alone. So she asked Kevin. When the words left her mouth, she almost regretted them. But he didn't blink, didn't make a joke or an excuse. He just smiled, soft and sure. If you want me there, I'll be there. The night of the gala, Alina sat before her mirror, hands steadying her lipstick against lips that trembled more than she cared to admit. Her navy gown flowed perfectly across her frame, the fabric hugging her curves before cascading into folds that pooled against her wheelchair. She twisted her hair into a sleek bun, diamond studs catching the light. When Kevin knocked, she wheeled to the door. He stood there in a charcoal suit, tie slightly crooked, cuffs a little long. He tugged at the collar, sheepish. Not exactly designer. Alina smiled despite her nerves. Perfect, she said, and meant it. The ballroom shimmered like a movie set. Chandeliers spilled golden light onto polished marble floors. Silver-trimmed linens covered tables, topped with arrangements of orchids and crystal glasses. Waiters in black vests moved like shadows. Trays of champagne balanced effortlessly on their palms. The moment they entered, heads turned. Alina felt the shift in the air immediately. The whispers, the raised brows. The way people glanced from her to Kevin and back again, like trying to solve a puzzle. She held her chin higher, wheeled forward with poise. Kevin walked beside her, his hand occasionally brushing hers when the crowd pressed too close. For a while, it felt steady. They talked with a senator, with 2 foundation directors, with a colleague who had once been kind. Kevin stayed quiet, letting her lead, but his presence grounded her. Then came Madison. Madison, the investment director, with a smile as polished as the pearl necklace around her throat. She slid into the conversation at dinner with practiced grace, her voice just loud enough to carry. I didn't know you were dating, Alina, she said sweetly. So refreshing to see a CEO open-minded enough to date someone. Grounded. The word lingered, sharpened. Grounded as in not wealthy, not polished, not part of their world. Alina's fork froze against her plate. Heat prickled at her skin. Kevin stiffened, his jaw tightened. He set his napkin down carefully. Excuse me, he murmured and stood. Alina reached for him, but he was already weaving through the tables, disappearing into the blur of couture gowns and champagne flutes. Her chest constricted. She wheeled back from the table, ignoring Madison's smug smile, and slipped out through the French doors into the cool night. Kevin stood halfway down the stone steps, his shoulders tense, his tie askew. The night air was sharp, carrying the faint smell of jasmine from the garden below. "Kevin," she called softly. He turned, jaw tight, eyes stormy. "I didn't want to make a scene." "You didn't," she said quickly. "That's the problem. I'm the scene." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" She wheeled closer, her voice breaking. "I don't fit here, Kevin. And by bringing you, I dragged you into a room where they look at you like you don't belong, like you're some mistake I'll regret tomorrow." His chest rose sharply. "Is that how you see me?" "No," she said, too quickly. Her throat tightened. "God, no. I see you building playgrounds when no one else will. I see you raising a daughter who believes in magic. I see you making space for me when I can't even make space for myself." Her voice cracked. "But I froze, Kevin. I should have said something. I should have told Madison exactly who you are. But I didn't. I was scared." His eyes softened slightly, but he didn't move closer. "Scared of what?" "Scared that if I claim you, I'll lose you when things get hard. Scared that if I stay quiet, I'll lose myself." She swallowed hard, her hands gripping her rim so tightly her knuckles whitened. "I've spent 2 years hiding behind strength. But tonight," her voice shook, "tonight I'm asking you to stay. Not because I'm strong, but because I'm finally brave enough to be afraid. And still choose you." The silence stretched, broken only by the rustle of ivy along the stone railing. Then Kevin stepped forward, slowly, purposefully. He crouched, reached out, and touched her cheek. "You don't have to choose between their world and mine," he said softly. "But I won't walk beside you in silence. Not when you mean everything to me." Her eyes filled, shimmering under the moonlight. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He shook his head gently. "I didn't need an apology. I just needed to hear the truth." Her forehead pressed against his, the cool night air tangling with the heat of their closeness. For the first time that evening, she wasn't the CEO in a wheelchair. She wasn't the outsider in a gilded room. She was just Alina, with the man who saw her, and this time she wasn't letting go. Later, back in her apartment, Alina stared at her reflection in the darkened window. For years, she had built her life around appearances, measured, polished, invincible. Tonight, those walls cracked, and instead of feeling weaker, she felt free. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of being seen. For 2 weeks after the gala, life felt lighter. Elena noticed it in the little things. The way her mornings didn't ache as much when she wheeled into her office. The way she caught herself humming under her breath while brewing coffee. The way Luna's laughter seemed to linger in her apartment long after the little girl had gone home. Kevin texted often, never too much, never too little. Just enough to remind her she wasn't drifting through the world alone anymore. For the first time in years, she let herself hope, which was why the headline hit like a punch to the chest. "Billionaire CEO fakes paralysis for sympathy. Insiders reveal marketing stunt." The words glared back at her from the glowing laptop screen, framed by a grainy 15-second video. The footage was shaky, filmed from a distance. It showed her in the park, Kevin at her side, helping her balance at the parallel bars. Her legs trembled, her body leaned into his, and for a few fragile seconds she was standing. There was no audio, no context, just those few seconds looped endlessly beneath the headline. The article was worse. It accused her of using her disability to shield herself from criticism after a year of declining profits. It suggested she'd manipulated investors, painted herself as a tragic heroine to secure loyalty. It even implied Kevin was part of the scheme, an everyman prop designed to humanize her icy corporate image. Alina's stomach twisted. Her phone buzzed with notifications, emails from colleagues, messages from acquaintances, alerts from news outlets. Social media was already on fire. Comments split between sympathy and venom. Some defended her, others mocked her. Many simply didn't know what to believe. By noon, the Vital Core board had called an emergency meeting. By 5, they placed her on temporary leave, pending review. And just like that, the wall she'd rebuilt began to crumble. That night, her apartment was silent, the kind of silence that screamed. She sat in the dark, the glow of the city painting fractured patterns across her ceiling. She didn't respond to texts. She didn't open emails. She ignored every call, except his. Kevin's name lit her phone again. She let it ring until it stopped. Then came the knock. Gentle, hesitant. Her throat closed. She knew it was him, but she couldn't move. Another knock. A pause, then his voice muffled through the door. Alina, I read it, all of it. Tears burned her eyes. I can't, she whispered to the empty room. His voice came again, steady, unwavering. Are you hurt? No? The word cracked out of her, hoarse. Not physically. Then why won't you let me in? She pressed her forehead against her knees, sobs threatening. Because if I do, I'll want to stay close. And if I stay close, you and Luna become targets too. They'll twist it. They'll twist you. I'm not dragging you through this storm. The silence on the other side stretched long enough to hurt. Then came the sound of him sitting down, his back against the door. You think I care what people on the internet say about me? His voice was low even. I've dealt with judgment my whole life, Alina. When Luna's mom left, people whispered that I drove her away. When I showed up to parent-teacher conferences in paint-stained jeans, they looked at me like I didn't belong in the pickup line. None of that broke me. Her chest ached. But do you know what would? His voice softened, but it carried steel. Watching someone I love shut me out because she thinks she's protecting me when all I want is to be in her corner. She flinched. Kevin, I didn't fall for a perfect woman, he interrupted gently. I fell for the one who wakes up every day and fights. The woman who took 2 steps when the world said she'd never stand again. The woman who laughs when my daughter spins her in circles. That's who I chose, Alina, and I'm not walking away now. Her tears spilled hot, uncontrollable. She pressed her hand against the door, wishing it were thinner, wishing she were braver. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered. I don't need you to fix it, he said softly. I just need you to let me in. Her hand lingered on the handle. Her pulse hammered. Then slowly, trembling, she turned it. The door opened. Kevin stood there, soaked from a light drizzle outside, his hair damp, his suit jacket wrinkled. But his eyes, steady, unwavering, met hers and didn't flinch. He didn't speak. He simply stepped forward, wrapped his arms around her, and held her tight. And for the first time since the story broke, the noise in her chest eased. You're not alone, he whispered against her hair. Not this time. And for once, she believed him. The next morning, the world was still cruel. The headlines hadn't softened. The comments hadn't stopped. The board hadn't reversed its decision. But when Alina opened her eyes, she wasn't alone. Kevin was asleep in the chair beside her bed, his head tilted back, his hands still loosely wrapped around hers as if he hadn't dared let go during the night. She studied him in the pale morning light, the lines at the corners of his eyes, the exhaustion written across his features, the quiet devotion in the way he stayed. Her heart swelled, fragile but fierce. For years, she had been defined by what she lost, her fiancé, her legs, her sense of belonging. Now in the storm of public judgment, she realized she still had something left. Someone who stayed. For 2 days after the scandal broke, Alina stayed quiet. She let the headlines roar, let strangers argue about her life like it was a courtroom case, let the board slice her future into sound bites. Every time her phone buzzed, her chest tightened. Every time she glanced at the purple wheelchair in Luna's drawing on her fridge, shame and fear collided in her stomach. But silence felt heavier than the accusations. Kevin's words replayed in her mind. Watching someone I love shut me out would hurt worse than anything they could say. And Luna's, see, Miss Alina, I knew you could do it. For years, Alina had let other people define her. Investors, colleagues, tabloids, even the cruel whispers of her own mind. But sitting there watching Kevin pour her a cup of coffee like it was the simplest thing in the world, she realized something. If she didn't speak now, the wrong story would become the only story. That afternoon, she set up her phone in her living room. No glam team, no PR spin. Just her, the soft afternoon sunlight filtering through the windows. She wore a plain white sweater and no makeup, her golden hair pulled loosely over one shoulder. Behind her, she taped Luna's drawing to the wall, a small, stubborn reminder of what mattered. When the screen blinked red, live, her throat tightened. For a long moment, she just breathed. Then she spoke. My name is Alina Whitmore. Some of you know me as the CEO of Vital Core. Some of you know me from headlines that I didn't write, and some of you might not know me at all. She paused, her chest rising and falling. Comments began trickling in across the screen. What's happening? We see you. Stay strong. 2 years ago, she continued, her voice steadier now. I was in a car accident. I lost my fiancé. I lost the use of my legs. And for a long time, I thought I'd lost my worth. The scrolling chat filled with hearts and sad emojis, but she didn't look away. Last week, someone accused me of faking my disability. They posted a 15-second video of me standing with help. What that video didn't show was 2 years of pain, therapy, setbacks, and hope so fragile I could barely breathe it. What it didn't show was the man who held me steady, or the little girl who shouted louder than my fear. What it didn't show was the truth. Her hands trembled slightly, but she leaned forward. I wasn't performing. I wasn't staging anything. I was trying. And for the first time in years, I believed it was okay to try. Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't stop. I didn't share my recovery journey because I didn't want pity. I didn't want to be known for what I lost. But I've realized hiding isn't strength. Healing doesn't need to be hidden. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's human. The comments poured faster now. We believe you. Thank you for saying this. This dance made me cry. Alina drew in a breath, steadying her voice. I'm stepping down as CEO, not because I'm ashamed, but because I want to live lighter, truer, slower. I want to love my life, not just lead it. And if that makes me less in someone else's eyes, that's okay, because I finally know I'm enough in mine. For a heartbeat, the silence felt endless. Then the flood came. Thousands of hearts, thousands of comments. Words like brave, beautiful, we see you, thank you. One stood out, glowing through the blur. We've been waiting for you to come home to yourself. Alina exhaled, then ended the stream. She sat in the quiet afterward, her body trembling with adrenaline. The air felt different, not lighter exactly, but real, honest. When she looked up, Kevin was standing in the doorway, a mug in his hand. His eyes were soft, almost reverent. You were brave, he said simply. Alina let out a shaky laugh. I was terrified. That's what made it real. She reached for his hand. He crossed the room, set the mug down, and let her fingers thread through his. The weight of the last few days pressed out of her chest in a long, unsteady sigh. Then unexpectedly, Kevin dropped to one knee beside her chair. No ring box, no diamonds, just him. I don't have a question, he said, his voice trembling slightly. I just have this, a promise. Let's walk through life, however long, however slow, together. And one day, when you're ready to dance for real, I want to be the one holding you. Her breath caught. Tears welled instantly, not from sadness, but from something deeper, something fierce and unshakable. She cupped his face with both hands. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, not because you saved me, not because you're perfect, but because I finally believe love doesn't have to hurt to be real. Kevin pressed his forehead to hers, his hand steady against her cheek. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Sometimes the quiet is the answer. The next morning, the world was still talking. But for the first time in 2 years, Alina didn't care. She wasn't the CEO in damage control. She wasn't the woman hiding behind strength. She was just herself. And when Luna burst into her apartment later that day, Bunny in tow, shouting, Miss Alina, did you see all the hearts on your video? Alina laughed until her cheeks hurt, because for the first time, she wasn't fighting to be seen. She was seen. The morning sun spilled across Alina's apartment, warm and golden, catching on the edges of the drawing still taped to her wall. Luna's 3 stick figures, one in glasses, one in a puffy lavender dress, one in a bright purple wheelchair, smiled back at her. For weeks, that simple drawing had been a compass, pointing her away from the shadows of her past and towards something she hadn't dared to believe in again. A future. Her live stream had changed everything, not just for the public, but for herself. For the first time in years, she'd spoken without armor, without spin, without hiding, and people hadn't turned away. They'd leaned in. They'd listened. Still, the aftermath wasn't all applause. Some tabloids doubled down, calling her calculated. Some investors muttered about betrayal, but the noise no longer pierced as deeply as it once had. Because when she looked over and saw Kevin pouring cereal for Luna at her kitchen counter, barefoot and rumpled, she knew what was real. That weekend, Kevin insisted she come to the park again. Not to prove anything, he told her as he buckled Luna into the back seat. Just to remind yourself that you can. Alina hesitated, anxiety prickling at her skin. The park was where the video had been filmed, where strangers had stolen a private moment and turned it into a weapon. The thought of returning made her palms sweat. But when they pulled up, something unexpected happened. A group of parents near the swings broke into applause. A few kids ran up, waving shyly. One mother reached out, her voice trembling. My daughter saw your video. She's 12. She's been scared to try walking again since her surgery. But when she saw you, she stood yesterday, just for a few seconds. She said, if Miss Alina can, I can too. Tears stung Alina's eyes before she could stop them. She had braced herself for judgment, but what she found instead was connection. Kevin leaned close, whispering, looks like your voice carried farther than you thought. She swallowed hard, overwhelmed. I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of responsibility. You don't have to be ready, he said gently. You just have to be real. Later at the parallel bars, Luna clapped her hands like a coach at the Super Bowl. Okay, Miss Alina, let's see your strong legs. Alina laughed nervously, but her hands gripped the bars. Kevin steadied her, his arm firm across her back. This time she took 3 steps, then 4. Her legs trembled, her body shook, but she kept moving, each step like defiance stitched into muscle. When she collapsed back into the chair, gasping, the small crowd that had gathered applauded softly. She wiped her face, cheeks wet with both sweat and tears. She wasn't embarrassed. For the first time, she was proud. Kevin crouched beside her, his eyes bright. That's strength, he said simply. Her chest swelled. Not with the old corporate pride she once wore like armor, but with something rawer, purer, hope. The next week, an invitation arrived in her inbox. This time not for a boardroom gala, but for a community fundraiser. A small-town event held at the very park Kevin had built. Alina stared at the email for a long time. Public appearances had once been her domain. Now they terrified her. But when Kevin found her hesitating, he placed a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to do it for them, he said. Do it for you. So she said yes. The day of the fundraiser, the park buzzed with energy. Food trucks lined the edges. Kids darted between booths. Local musicians played from a small stage. Kevin was everywhere at once, helping a vendor set up, fixing a crooked sign, handing out napkins to a toddler who dropped her snow cone. Luna tugged at Alina's arm. Come on, they want you to speak. Alina's chest tightened. I don't know, sweetheart. You don't have to say a lot, Kevin said, appearing beside her, his eyes steady. Just enough to remind them why this place matters, why you matter. Her heart pounded as she wheeled up the small ramp to the stage. The microphone felt heavy in her hands. The crowd hushed, faces turning toward her. I wasn't sure I belonged here, she began, her voice shaking. For a long time, I believed my story ended the day of my accident. But being here, with all of you, with Kevin and Luna, I realized something. My story didn't end. It changed. And that's okay. She paused, scanning the crowd. Parents held their children closer. Kids leaned forward, listening. This playground isn't just swings and slides, she continued, her voice strengthening. It's a promise that no child has to feel left out, that no parent has to explain why their kid can't join the fun. And I'll tell you this, belonging doesn't start in boardrooms. It starts here, in places like this, where we choose to see each other. Applause erupted, warm and genuine. Alina's hands shook as she set down the microphone. But when she looked out at the crowd, she didn't see pity. She saw respect. And in Kevin's eyes, shining back at her from the front row, she saw something even deeper. Love. That evening, after the fundraiser wound down, they walked, or in her case, wheeled, through the park as the sun dipped low. Children's laughter still echoed faintly, but the grounds were mostly empty. Kevin slowed beside her, his hands shoved into his pockets. You know, he said, when I first built this place, I hoped it might change a few lives. I didn't know one of them would be mine. Her throat tightened. Kevin, he stopped, crouched beside her chair so their eyes were level. You've been fighting battles no one else sees. And still, you show up. Still, you try. You make me believe in second chances. Her eyes blurred, tears slipping free. I'm scared, Kevin. Scared that this won't last. That one day I'll fall again, and everyone will see me as weak all over. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear. Then let them see, because I'll be there to remind you what strength really looks like. It's not never falling. It's standing back up, even if it takes help. Her breath caught, her chest aching in the best possible way. For the first time, she didn't just feel like the woman who survived. She felt like the woman who was learning to live. And as the last rays of sunlight bathed the park in a golden glow, Alina realized something she never thought she'd believe again. She was ready for whatever came next. The garden was alive with late spring color, the kind of soft bloom that carried the promise of new beginnings. Rows of white chairs lined the aisle, each decorated with sprigs of lavender and baby's breath. Twinkling lights wound their way through the branches overhead, shimmering like stars waiting for night to fall. Elena sat just beyond the archway, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her navy wheelchair gleamed in the sunlight, but today it wasn't her cage. It was her choice. Kevin stood at the end of the aisle, his charcoal suit pressed, his eyes locked on hers with the kind of steady devotion that made her stomach twist in the best way. Luna stood beside him, bouncing with excitement in her lavender dress, clutching her bunny like a bouquet. The music began. A gentle melody floated across the garden. Alina's heart hammered. She could have rolled down the aisle. No one would have judged her. But for months now she had been practicing, one shaky step after another, Kevin at her side, Luna cheering until her voice cracked. And today she wasn't just surviving, she was choosing. Her hands gripped the bars of her chair. Kevin took a step forward, his brow furrowed with quiet worry. But she shook her head, her lips trembling in a smile. "I've got this," she whispered. With deliberate care she rose. Her legs wobbled, her body trembled, but she straightened. Gasps rippled through the guests as she steadied herself. Then one step, another. Her knees shook, but her spirit surged. Each step felt like defiance. Each step felt like freedom. By the time she reached Kevin, tears blurred her vision. She nearly collapsed, but his arms were there. Strong, steady, unshakable. He caught her as if it were choreographed. "You walked," he whispered, awe in his voice. "I lived," she replied, breathless, her smile radiant through tears. The ceremony unfolded under the golden sky, simple and unadorned. No scripted perfection, just honesty. The officiant spoke of love not as a fairy tale, but as a choice to stay when it's easier to leave, to believe when it's easier to doubt, to keep building even when the world tries to tear it down. Kevin squeezed her hand. "Alina, I don't promise you a perfect life. I promise you a real one. I promise to hold you when you fall, laugh with you when you rise, and never walk away when storms come. You are not my weakness. You're my home." Her throat tightened, but she found her voice. "Kevin, I spent years thinking I had to carry my strength alone. But you taught me that strength isn't silence. It's letting someone see the scars, the fear, the fight, and still choosing to love anyway. You are not just the man who stayed. You're the man who made me believe in tomorrow again." Luna squealed, clapping her hands, and the crowd laughed through their tears. When they kissed, the garden erupted in applause. But for Alina, the world went quiet. Just the warmth of Kevin's lips, the squeeze of his hands, and the sweet weight of belonging pressed into her chest. At the reception, tables overflowed with food and laughter. Friends and strangers alike danced under the lights, their joy contagious. Alina sat with Luna on her lap, the little girl giggling as she fed her cake with messy fingers. Kevin leaned over, wiping frosting from Alina's cheek. "You know, I never thought I'd end up here." Alina raised an eyebrow. "At your own wedding?" He chuckled. "At this wedding, with you, with her?" He nodded at Luna, who was humming happily between them. "It feels like the life I never thought I deserved." Alina kissed his hand. "You deserved it all along. You just needed someone stubborn enough to see it." "And you?" he asked softly. She glanced at the dance floor, at the music in motion calling to her. "I needed someone to remind me that broken doesn't mean finished." He stood, offering his hand. "Dance with me?" Her chest tightened. For years she had feared this moment, feared the stares, the whispers. But tonight, the fear didn't matter. She let him guide her onto the floor. He held her close, steadying her as her chair glided in rhythm with his steps. It wasn't the dance of her past, the perfect spins in high heels. It was better, raw, imperfect, breathtakingly real. And when Luna squeezed between them, clutching both their hands and spinning in giggles, Alina laughed so hard her cheeks ached. It wasn't just a dance, it was proof. Proof that life after loss could still be beautiful. Proof that love could be chosen, again and again. Proof that families could be built not from perfection, but from persistence. As the night wound down, Alina wheeled to the edge of the garden, looking up at the stars. Kevin joined her, slipping his arm around her shoulders. Luna fell asleep on his other side, Bunny tucked beneath her chin. Alina whispered, almost to herself. 2 years ago, I thought my story ended. But maybe the truth is, it was just beginning. Kevin kissed her temple. It always was. She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. For the first time in years, the silence inside her wasn't empty. It was full of love, of hope, of the promise of tomorrow. And now I'll ask you, the listener, do you believe strength is about never falling or about choosing to rise again, even if it takes someone else's hand to do it?